Jumping into it today, continuing our series, Act Like Men, and we have been undergirding this series through this truth in this scripture, 1 Corinthians 16, 13 through 14, and it says this, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong, and of course, this is the clarifier for all of those things, and let all that you do be done in love. So we're watchful in love, and stand firm in the faith in love, act like men, and be strong, all in love. And of course, our example of that is Jesus Christ, who was both all of those things, but he did everything in love, right? And so we're trying to clarify really what that in love even looks like. And so, of course, we've been talking each week about, first week was what is a man, last week was husbands and marriage, and we've been saying each week this line here that when men step into their purpose, everything flourishes, but when they refuse, everything burns. And that's, again, not to blame or point the fingers at men, it is to call us forth, to rise us up, to be all in who that God has called us to be. Well, today we're talking about men and fatherhood, and to get started, let's talk a little bit about the idea and the common trope about daddy issues, right? Daddy issues. And what's ironic, and you see it in culture all the time of, why is he or she like that? And it's like if you talk to them long enough, it can often be pointed back to, so-and-so's got daddy issues. Daddy was too harsh, or dad wasn't there, or dad was distant, or dad worked too much, or dad didn't work at all, and all of this stuff. And maybe, though, it is something that is true, though, that the reason that a lot of people blame their issues on daddy issues, maybe it actually kind of points to the fact that when we look at statistics, and I know, again, the stats again, but this stuff, this is sometimes I feel like I'm trying to prove it through the Bible, but oftentimes what's great is when the Bible gets proven through outside circumstances, so that's what statistics kind of show us. And so the stats are, again, read this the first week, but when fathers are involved in a child's life, those children are 80% less likely to spend time in jail, 75% less likely to experience teen pregnancy. The children who are in father-absent home, they account for 71% of all high school dropouts, 90% of homeless and runaway children, and 63% of youth suicide. And as we talked in the first week, while our culture loves to talk about, poverty and racial dynamics and all of these kind of things like that point to all of these problems in society, and those are great conversations that absolutely we need to have and the church needs to have them. But by far and large, the biggest common predictor of whether a child's going to be successful or not is whether the father is present and active in the home and in the child's life. And this isn't just for the kids. The same stats also show us the reverse for the dad, that becoming an engaged father has benefits as well. As well, that engaged dads set goals and achieve greater success in their life, that engaged dads have healthier habits that become more important, and this last one I love, that self-esteem increases as dads see their value, which points back to our main point of this, is that when men step into their purpose, everything flourishes, including the men, because we men are built on purpose for a purpose. Like, that's really, really key. And of course, again, if you're new and you're jumping in today, it's like, wow, does this church they just talk about dudes here all the time? No. Again, as we said in the first week, if you're a wife here today, I'm trying to work on the one you got. If you have a daughter or a son, I'm trying to help you point them in the right direction for their future. And so while we're not talking directly about you, this is absolutely for you too here as well, ladies. And so, speaking of ladies, there is something I want to note before we go any farther, specifically for today. And I just want to let me try to be a pastor really quickly. In a church our size, I understand that a lot of you moms here, maybe the dad isn't present in your child's life for different circumstances. Maybe you're a widower, maybe you're divorced, you're separated, or you're single and you're raising a child alone. Please do not allow today to be a tool of the enemy to make you think that your child doesn't have as much hope or as much possibility as a child that is being raised with a father in the home. That's not what today is at all. What we're talking about today is what you would call the ideal. This is the scriptural ideal and direction of how we're supposed supposed to try to orient our life, but of course we live in the real world too. And so what my encouragement to you is number one, do not be discouraged. Do not be discouraged today, okay? Because there are so many incredibly powerful stories of how God works through a mom who loves Jesus and helps that kid be raised up, become pastors or leaders or presidents and all these kind of stuff like that. So don't let today be an discouragement to you. Number two, what I do encourage you to do is that you need to be more strategic in raising your kids, because if there's not an active father at home, you need to make sure that your kids are surrounded by consistent, godly mentors. And so what that means specifically if you have a boy, that they need to be surrounded by strong, godly men. And that might be a grandfather or an uncle, or it might be somebody in the church. That might be, in some kind of organization in the church. That might be in some sort of student ministry, whatever it is. You just need to be very strategic and making sure that your child has good mentors in their life. And what I would suggest, this might sting a little, but what that means is not every boyfriend that crosses your path needs to have that role. Now, you need to be dating looking for father material, because they're not just marrying you, they will take over the raising of your children. But while you're dating, one, practically, we talked about this last week, they don't need to be moving in. That's not how that's supposed to work. But also, they don't need to come in with some sort of authority if they're going to be gone in 3 or 6 months or a year, okay? Children need consistency. And what happens is, if you're not careful, each one that comes in and that your child falls a little bit in love with, they have an authority over your child's life, and then they leave, that's another version of abandonment, and you need to be careful. Okay, so today though, I'm not trying to say that, oh my gosh, if you don't have this, that is not how the Lord works at all. It is beauty from ashes, man. Beauty from ashes, and even the most perfect looking family ain't perfect, okay? So, just want to say, make sure that we're all clear on that. So, what I want to do is I want to talk about, as we've been doing in this series, starting with what something is not, what a man is not, what marriage is not. And today I want to start by talking about what a father is not. And I have 2 specific things for us that I think will be helpful. Number one, this one may sting, but let me clarify before you jump to any conclusions. This is a big deal. Number one, a father is not a friend. A father is not a friend. And so I want to put a little tag there, at least not at first. Okay? A father is not a friend, or at least not at first. You see, a parent's primary responsibility is to equip your child for an adulthood. And I'm a visual learner. To give you a visual, I need you to picture your kids like boats, okay? And that your child is a boat, and life is the ocean. And while they are at your home, AKA they are in dock, you are training, building, equipping, and supplying them to go out, to launch out and be able to not just sail on the water, but to endure the storms of life that will inevitably come. And so you are to equip your children to go out and do that. And of course, what a child then needs from his parents or his or her, is what a child needs is this. They need direction. Your child needs direction. That's why, of course, we don't let children make huge decisions about themselves. We don't let them make these life-altering decisions about themselves and all this kind of stuff that sometimes, weirdly enough, culture will actually try to push on to children. Why? Because children need directions from their parents. I mean, I need to tell my kids, don't play in the highway. Because kids don't know. They're ignorant. They're naive. They need direction. They need discipline. Children need discipline, consistent discipline. Because without discipline, you know what a child turns into? A selfish, chaotic adult. And those kind of adults go around and they don't just hurt themselves, but they hurt everybody they come in contact with. I mean, some of you have been in relationships with somebody that honestly just wasn't disciplined. They wasn't taught to think outside themselves and consequences for their actions. And lastly, that your child needs from you is they need wisdom. Now, wisdom and direction are different. Direction helps points the child in the way they should go. Wisdom, though, is the seeds of God's truth that you implant into a child's life that helps them make the decisions they need to make when you're not there. Because here's the problem. You can have all direction and you can try to focus your child and you're over everything. And as they grow older, you're still, micromanaging all of their decisions, but your child may have no wisdom. You got to start instilling wisdom even when they're young so that when they're not around you, when they leave for college, when they're out with friends, that they know how to make the wise decisions without having to worry about what you would do. I mean, that's practical living in Christian living. So, ways that we can kind of keep this becoming a friend of our children from happening. Here are just a few tips. I want to be practical about this. What this could look like is, number one, you need to be careful about making your child your confidant. You be careful of making your child your confidant. And of course, what that means is oversharing too much about your own personal struggles and stuff in life. Now, listen, I think it's very important actually for a parent to share your mistakes with your kids, to share even God's mercy of how he has come through. You need to model repentance with your kids, but you need to be careful about how you share your active current life and what you're struggling with. Let's just take an outrageous example. You're going through a bad spot, you're really depressed, and all of a sudden you say to your 12-year-old, I just don't know if God exists. Why would you say that? Because they don't have context like you do. You're probably feeling that, and all of a sudden the next day you're like, no, God exists, fine. I was just in a bad spot yesterday. Your child hasn't moved on. Your child is not your friend. You are their leader and mentor. You're supposed to be teaching them, and so you need to be careful about how much you're confiding into your children. Number two, you need to be very careful. This is going to sound like a statement on culture, but it's actually not. It's just practical. But you need to be careful about criticizing people like your child's school, teacher, leaders, and stuff like that in front of them. I'm not saying you have to agree, but you just need to be careful about how you undermine authority in front of your child because they don't have the context again. That teacher may be an idiot, but you don't need to say your teacher's an idiot. Because what that's going to teach them to do is that mom and dad doesn't respect authority. I don't have to respect authority. I'm going to go and tell that teacher she's an idiot. I mean, that's what kids do. And again, that's what a friend does. That's not what a parent does. See the difference? Like a friend does confide. A friend does say what they're thinking. Another thing that you need to be careful of doing if you're as a parent is placing the discipline role on the other spouse, which means you get to be the fun parent. You get to have all the grins and the giggles, and whether, listen, it might be mom and it might be dad, but that is not okay. That's not what we do. You don't get to be the friend while the other parent has to parent. No, you both share in the load of parenting. And again, if I were to step outside of this conversation really quickly, I understand that a lot of you in the room may be trying to co-parent, or there's other people in the picture. You're divorced, you're separated, or whatnot. I understand that can be difficult. So I want to speak to the men really quickly. I'm challenging you to lead in having the difficult conversations that you and your ex-spouse or whoever that person may be, to try to be on the same page, because listen, it's not about you two. Listen, it's not about you two. That if you decide to separate, you need to then immediately turn your focus back onto the child and how this is going to affect their life, because divorce, whether you do it amicably or not, is still extremely traumatic. And that's not my words, that's the scientific data that states that. Divorce is extremely traumatic. And so what happens then is when two parents start to use the child as bait and ammunition, I got to be honest with you, it's pretty wicked. Like, it's not of God. And I know it sounds harsh, but you need to come together. Even if you can't agree on much anything else, the child is not a pawn to be played with. And you need to come together and say, this is what we are going to allow our kid to do or not do. And I know there's a lot of mess in there of one spouse is a believer or not. I know there's a lot. Maybe that's why that's why we have Christian counselors here. We'll try to help you through that. But just know that you don't try to be the fun parent to get back at the other parent. But that happens in marriages too. No, you both come together on the discipline. And number 4, not allowing proper separation when your child is in adolescence. Your children do need to launch out. So, point being this: one day, kids will need a friend in their father, but they need a father first. I hope that all you fathers one day are great friends with your adult children. I hope you go fishing together. I hope you talk about life. I hope you're a great grandfather. I hope that is the way the Lord blesses you. But when they are in your home, you are not a friend, you are their father. Because they can go find friends all day long. but you're the only father that they have. And so that is just a really important place. So don't lay that aside by trying to be the cool dad. Sometimes your kid's gonna not like you, and that's okay. You know, that's okay. I gotta be honest with you, even as a pastor, I don't like all of God's decisions for my life. But I do know that he's a loving father that wants the best for me. And so if I'm gonna be humble and I'm gonna accept his discipline, I just have to come underneath that and say, Lord, I don't like this, but I'm gonna follow you anyway. And that's ultimately what you need to instill into the heart of your children. Number 2 thing that a father is not only harsh. A father is not only harsh. And the reason I felt that I needed to speak on this is maybe it's our southern upbringing, which often kind of happens. I know that's not always the case, but let's say for the majority of the time, you have the nature versus nurture that we've always heard about. And who's the nurturer? Who's the nurturer, mom or dad? It's mom. You know how I know that? Because as a dad, I couldn't wait to buy my oldest son his first knife. Like I couldn't wait for it. Like I was just so excited. It wasn't a big knife, but I mean, I still a knife. And I was like, because it's like, yeah, boy, in our blood, we had to kill animals. That's what our ancestors did. I'm going to give you a weapon. And of course, what does his mom do? Start talking about you need to be safe and all this kind of, buzzkill stuff, right? Why? Because it's nature versus nurture. And I'm trying to say, we come from nature, woman. And she's all like, but we need to nurture them, whatever. But here's the thing. All jokes aside, I really did buy him a knife. I remember getting my first hunting rifle with my father. That was a big deal in my life. And I very vividly remember that moment. But the reason I say that is because I think what happens sometimes in our culture, and I feel it as a father, that we take all the stress and all the input and all the frustrations of our life, working hard all day. And I know moms, you can struggle with this too, I get it, but especially for us dads, because we don't have that automatic nurturing. We come home and the kids I think they give them speed in school. They say it's the red food coloring, but I don't know what it is. But it's something. And it's 7:30 and they are somehow climbing Mount Everest in your living room. And as a mom do, moms can fuss, but they always like fuss and love, and then dad steps in. And when dad steps in, the earth starts to shake, right? And what I fear even for myself, I'm trying to be very careful, is that I don't always come in as the final authority and that dad's always angry. But I have to be careful because a lot of time I am angry. And so a father should not always just be harsh. Now I do think that we are the ultimate authority in the home, and that when it comes down to brass tacks, like that's why mamas always used to say, you wait till your father gets home. Like there's a thing about that, right? Because my dad didn't think nothing about getting that belt out. Don't play with old dad. But see, Paul was kind of talking about this a little bit too. He understood that there was this tendency within men to sometimes be a little too harsh on our children. And he gives 2 examples, and what's uncanny is he writes this to 2 different churches, but it's almost the exact same thing. It's only one of the few times it really happens like this in the New Testament. In Ephesians 6:4, Paul writes, he says, Father, don't stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in training and instruction of the Lord. And then in Colossians 3:21, he says, fathers, do not exacerbate your children so that they do not become discouraged. So what these verses mean is that a father is not to foster negativity in his children by his severity, injustice, partiality, or unreasonable exercise of authority. So what does that look like? That means your kids are just being kids and you fly off the handle because you can't handle the stress. And listen, I get it. I've been there. I've had to repent. And honestly, that is something typically that happens to fathers. Doesn't mean that you moms can't struggle with that too, but a lot of times it's dads. And so Paul's saying, listen, dads, be careful how you respond, because stirring up or exacerbating means to irritate, to rub the wrong way, or to incite. And while discipline absolutely matters and absolutely is necessary, we do it through love, not through anger. We do it in love and not through anger, which might mean you need to step outside and take a few breaths before you come in and deal with your kids. I get it. But you don't You don't speak always harshly. And because listen, the reason I know this is why it's a big deal is that some of you don't want to actually discipline your kids because your father was too harsh on you. So that's the thing. Or you don't know how to handle conflict without just flying off the handle because it was never modeled helpfully for you. So that's why I know it's a thing, because many of us didn't see that modeled well. And I'm trying to tell you, you can. You can model it well, and you can model it better. So Christian fathers should discipline in strength. Yes, we're not pushovers, but certainly in love. Now, another note, because I don't want to leave you ladies out. I just, again, want to throw this out there. I talked about this for a second, but please make sure that you don't always have a wait until daddy comes home mentality. When daddy comes home should mean that he's just reinforcing what you've already done, you know. Or listen, I know this is tough. If dad comes off as too harsh, don't undermine him in front of the children. You do that separately in a separate room. You pull him aside and say, honey, I think you were way too harsh. I think you were out of line. But not, don't you dare tell my baby that. You know, I don't know. We don't do that. You don't undermine him in that moment, because guess what? That ain't going to work well. You know what? Because dad's going to come like him. I'm telling you, to be honest. My wife's not here today. I can be a little, this isn't recorded either. I mean, she came at me like that. I was like, whoa, oh, now the bear's coming. You know, like that's just not how this is going to work. Like, no, you pull aside, and same thing, husbands with your wife. If there's going to be a disagreement about those things, don't undermine each other in front of your kids, okay? It's a partnership together. So that is the two things that a father is not. He's not a friend, and a father should not always be harsh. So what I want to talk about for the remainder of our time are the specific primary roles that a father should be playing in the life of their children. And when I use the word roles, I hope that kind of makes a keynote in your mind now after this series, is that when God created the world, he created a specific order. And as we talked last week, that he did make men and women different on purpose for a purpose. And that men and women complement each other in the family. And when they try to overtake one another's roles, things go bad. Anytime you have you're thinking about, or you want to step into your wife's shoes, your husband's shoes, always go back to the Garden of Eden. What happened the last time the men stepped back and the women stepped forward and they started making decisions out of order? What happened? The rest of humanity happened. All of the sin, diseases, and wars and everything. Why? Because the first family didn't walk their order out. So we have a complementary but distinctive set of roles that we're supposed to play in the Christian family. It's not my rules. I'm just the messenger. That is how God has designed the family to work. And so the father has some primary roles. Number one being this, that a father's primary role is to, number one, represent Jesus to his children. This is probably the most important thing, even though it's going to be the least directly practical thing, because this is a lifestyle and not just a set of steps. But a father's primary role is to represent Jesus to your children. That means that their first understanding of God, dads, will come from them watching you. And the reason I know this to be true is because many of us struggle with the concept of God because we base him, knowingly or unknowingly, on our fathers. Either God is angry because our dad was angry, God was distant because our dad was distant or not there. God is all loving and a granddaddy because you were raised by a granddaddy. And so much of our fathers paint into the picture of who God is for both your children, sons or daughters. And that's why when Solomon wrote Proverbs 22:6, the verse that we all know, that start a youth out on his way, and even when they grow old, they will not depart from it. Or raise up a child in the way they should go, they will not depart from it. Again, what that means is how you teach a child in the everyday steps and seasons of their life is how those kids will turn out. That's why you just do what your parents did. You think like your parents do. You have a lot of the same bad habits that they do. You have a lot of the good qualities that they do. And within Christian faith, the challenge here is just coming to church on occasion isn't training your child up in the way it should go. Or a better example, we talked last week about as the husband's job, you should not be making your wife drag you to church. I am fully convinced that the picture in Scripture is that you as a husband and a father lead your family in Christian faith. That's the Christian ideal. And so by having your wife have to drag you to church, what that's training your children to think is that dad doesn't want to go, mom makes us go. When I'm old enough, I'm not gonna go. That's training your child up in the way they should go. And you know what? Many of them do not depart from that. And so it's really important that what you demonstrate on a daily basis is what this verse is pointing to. Another easy example is my oldest son. He's about to turn 9, and he has been begging us for a phone. Now, I could say it was maybe because some of his friends have phones, but that isn't really the case. That isn't the truth. The reason he wants a phone so bad is because he sees his mother and father staring at theirs. And so, can I blame him? And you know what's crazy in my mind, what I think, just practically stepping into my parenting here, is like, I almost want to tell him, son, don't start, you'll never stop. You know, I can remember a time when these didn't exist, buddy. You know, but the fact is truth be told, we're probably on our phones too much. You know, what I learned through the fast, honestly, as I was honest, I was just on my phone way, way too much. And I've tried to keep up some of those healthy patterns. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't. But the fact is, that's training our children up. And so why would they not want one? They see us on, half the time they know the back of our phones better than they do our face, you know? And I mean, I hate that. Like, that's part of our culture, and it's not good. But that's what that actually means. That's what that verse is pointing to. So, your personal faith, fathers, is so important because you are the representation of God's love and his forgiveness in a practical way. That's why how you respond matters. That's why your kids seeing you pray matters. That's why your kids being able to see you walk out your faith matters. Because they're going to form their idea of God based on you. So I want to challenge you, men, as Joshua challenged the people of Israel long ago in Joshua 24. It says, now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Joshua talking. He says, throw away the gods your ancestors worshiped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt and serve the Lord. Throw away your past. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose. Joshua said, hey, you guys need to choose. Choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors or the gods of the Amorites in the lands you are living. But here's the key. Here's the key. But for who? It's not your question. But for me and my household. That's really the key line of that. But for me. So fathers, they cannot be. But for my household, your household starts with you. But for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. So that's my challenge to you on there. Number 2, a father's primary role is to love their mother well. In the family of fathers, and you're like, well, aren't we talking about marriage now? Yes, but as a father, one of your primary goals, as instructed by Scripture, is to love their mother well. And we talked a lot about marriage last week. I'm not going to go down into the depths of that. But there was a quote that as I was studying that I just kept coming across, and it kept just stirring something in my spirit. Don't know who the author is, but it says the most important thing a father can do for his children is to love their mother. Now, there's a few reasons for this. Because see, one, it teaches kids that marriage is the foundation of the family, rather. That marriage is the foundation of the family, meaning you're not a family because you had kids. You're a family because mommy and daddy loved each other first. That's what starts the family. That's what keeps the family going. And listen, your kids need to know that in some way, as much as you love them to death, that you are excited for the day that they get out of your house. Like, listen, I love you, but my job is to not live with you forever. Honestly, don't tell that to your 3-year-old, you know. But your kids, as they grow older, need to know that, listen, y'all are raining on our parade, you know. Y'all are raining on my time. You know, that's why it's important to be dating your spouse now. We talked about that last week. So that they understand, listen, it isn't just about you and your wife. It's about them having that proper understanding of the ideal and the purpose of marriage for themselves. That it's something to be attained because, again, why do we have such a negative view of marriage? Maybe because a lot of us were raised with parents that had really bad marriages. But that doesn't mean that the Bible was wrong. It just means that we didn't get it right. We messed up, and we had a generation that didn't apologize and didn't explain things well. So it teaches your kid that marriage is the foundation of the family. It teaches your sons how to love their future wives. I mean, your sons don't need to love their wives to spite of you. They need to love their wives well because of your example. And furthermore, it also teaches your daughters, men, how to be loved by a man. Because this whole charm and trope of, when that boy comes home, I'm going to have the shotgun out on the table, and that's fine, whatever. But listen, I'll be honest with you. I think if you're loving her mother well, she's not going to go find the man that you need to be so worried about. Now, I'm not saying this is perfect all the time, but if you're representing the kind of masculinity, and the strong servant of the Lord who loves her mama well, I don't think she's going to go get some jerk. She's going to probably find somebody a lot more like you than you want to realize. And so it practically teaches our kids the importance of marriage. So, practical tips here. Number one, never let your kids come in between you and your spouse. Date your spouse. And this last one is important. Let them see you sacrifice for her. Let them see you sacrifice for her. And I don't know what your dynamic is, but maybe that means every Saturday morning, Daddy gets up and he cooks breakfast for Mommy. I don't know what her love language is. I don't know. Don't do that if she hates breakfast. But, what is her love language? Let them see you sacrifice something that's important to you for her because she's more important than that. Daddy's not going to go hunting today because Mommy wants to do this. But Dad, don't you love to go hunting? Yes, but Mommy's way more important than hunting. Mommy's way more important. I get it all on that. My wife's not even here for the brownie points. Dadgummit. Tell her to listen to this message, folks. Anyway, I didn't say this in first service. All right, number three. A father's primary role is to prepare your kids for the world they will live in. A father's primary responsibility is to prepare the kids for the world they will live in. What that means is not the world that you grew up in. I mean, I get it, we're all nostalgic, and it's cool, and technology didn't exist, but your kids do not know that world. My kids don't know that world. My 2-year-old thinks everything's a touchscreen because almost everything is. Why would she not? And so what happens is that we're often preparing our kids for a world that hasn't existed for the past 25 years. And we're totally inept and unaware of what's actually happening in their life. And here's the uncomfortable truth, dads, that I need to tell you, is that something or someone will disciple your kids. Like, discipleship is not just a biblical thing. It's just what happens. Our hearts are always in tuned and inclined to be discipled by something. And so it might be your own selfish desires. It may be their friends at school. And honestly, right now, the easiest thing is that social media and TikTok that they all spend hours and hours watching. Like, it's forming their thoughts and ideas about the world, about their life, about their bodies, about dating, about marriage, about sex, about all of those things. They're being discipled by those things, and you need to be aware. Like, you need to know what they're being exposed to. Because see, we as Christian parents, we must prepare them for their future of living Christian faith out in a world with darkness, how to be a light in darkness. We need to prepare them for what marriage looks like within the Christian mindset, or for what parenting looks like. And I love how Solomon puts it in Psalm 127. He says, children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Children are a reward, they're a blessing. See, like arrows in the hand of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full. And I love this verse, one, because I need to be reminded sometimes my kids are a blessing. Oh, I'm so blessed, in the middle of the night. I'm blessed, Lord, thank you. But number two, I love the idea of arrows. I love the idea of arrows. Because you know what? Shooting an arrow, and I'm not an expert in any capacity, but shooting an arrow takes two things. It takes intentionality and focus. Intentionality is you have to pull the string back. An arrow will not go unless the force is applied to the bow for it to have the force to return it back out. So that's intentionality. But you can intentionally pull it back and aim it nowhere specifically, and that'll hurt somebody, right? And so to shoot it well, you have to have intentionality and focus. And the same thing needs to happen with your kids. The intentionality is being deliberate and making sure you are taking the appropriate time and steps to teach them and keep up with them, hear what they're talking about, listen to them, and don't just even talk, listen, make sure you're listening to them. And then the focus, keeping the end in mind. Where do you need them to be when they're 18? What kind of father or mother do you want them to be? What kind of husband or wife do they need to be? Keeping the end in mind. Now, here's some practical tips. They'll be on the screen. Number one, I need to challenge you to be a student of the culture that your kids are living in. I know it seems weird and you don't know what half the word means. I get it. But you need to be a student of culture. You need to be able to communicate what culture is actually preaching to your kids, because I'm not the only preacher out here. Culture's preaching to them. You need to understand, listen, when your kids start coming to you with some of the current ideologies about sex and gender and life and marriage, your answer cannot be, well, the Bible says so. Okay, well, my buddy on TikTok just said that the Bible's not true and it was made up. What now, Dad? What now, Dad? Oh, well, the Bible says that it's God breathed, and you need to be a student of the culture so you can preach back to that and say, oh, no, you need to listen here. That little idiot on TikTok don't know nothing. And their mom and daddy probably don't love them either, you need to be able to preach back to culture. You need to be able to understand and help them have proper discernment of ideas, because they're being exposed to stuff that honestly you might not even have been exposed to yet. That's the scary thing. They're having to answer questions that nobody's ever asked you. That's why you got to be a student of the culture that they're in as a parent. Number two, if you're a young person in here, just close your ears. I need you to go, la, 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 la. Parents, you need to keep proper tabs on your kids. You need to keep proper tabs on your kids. I know that is not a popular thing to do because we need to give them space. One time, I remember very vividly, I was probably 15, 16, and I was arguing with my mother, which probably wasn't smart. And I finally go, well, don't you trust me? And she looked at me, she goes, no. I remember it to this day. And you know what? She had every reason not to trust me. And not because I was even a terrible kid, to be honest. Like I wasn't. I was still a dumb kid, I didn't think through hardly anything. I just acted on impulse, It's what kids do. And so you need to keep tabs on who their friends are, where they're going, what they're watching. Listen, we're in a better place in some senses. Download some nanny program, get it on there. And listen, the problem is you have young kids, this is vital right now. Don't wait until your kids are 12, 13, 14 and say, now I'm locking you down. Too late. You prepare them for when that season comes, you can begin to release them with a leash, with some space, but that you still know what's going on in their life. You need to have that type of relationship with them. Because listen, they have to be strong Christian adults in the world. You can't just release them at 18 and say like, gosh, I hope that works out. That's terrible. So keep proper tabs on the kids. Number three, man, this is a big deal. Teach them how to communicate and defend their Christian faith. Teach them how to communicate and defend their Christian faith. Now, I get that probably means that you need to learn how to communicate and defend your Christian faith. And I get that. I know you're thinking like, well, I'm not a pastor. Listen, I want to be as plain as I can be. The days of Christian believers saying, well, my pastor knows, is over. Because nobody is coming to me first. They're going to Google first. They're going to the internet first. So your kids aren't going to want to come listen to me. They don't care. I'm not an authority in their life. But you are. And so as a Christian believer, we have to gonna return back to a portion or a time where our Christian faith in our own self is strong enough and that we can communicate and verbalize that truth back to our children. And that may be stretching because sometimes, maybe you don't know where to start, but I'm gonna give you a tip. One of the best things you can do, and it's a free resource this church provides. It's not a plug, this is absolutely legitimately true. We pay a monthly fee for something called Right Now Media. You go to our website, click on the little 3 bars at the top or the homepage or the headers up there, go to resources, and all the way down to that little bar, Right Now Media. It's free. It does not cost us a dime for every single one of you to sign up. It's the same fee for the church. That's how it works. I don't care if you get your friends on it at work. It does not matter. We can have 10,000 people on it. But on there, it is a Netflix for Bible studies. Well, you can put it on your phone in your ride into work. It's got all sorts of discipleship stuff, teenager stuff, series on men, on women, on defending your faith. Like, it's all there. It's, guys, I can't preach it all. It's hours and hours and hours and hours. So what you need is just the initiative and desire. But I'm telling you, you can't just expect this church to do it all. I get 1 hour a week with you. And in that hour, it's only supposed to be 35 minutes, but usually it's 40 or 45. It's another story. So, teach them how to communicate and defend their faith.